You've probably heard it 1,000 times. One will be taken and one left. For most of us, that phrase means rescue, right? But what if it means the exact opposite? In this explainer, we're going to dig into the idea that being taken might not be about safety, but about judgment. So let me ask you, when you hear those words, one will be taken and one left, what's the first image that comes to mind? For millions, it's the rapture, the moment believers are just swept up to meet Christ. But what if that incredibly popular idea misses a crucial and frankly a pretty unsettling clue right there in the text? The whole argument here is that maybe these iconic verses aren't describing a rescue at all. See, in the Bible, the idea of being taken away isn't always a good thing. Sometimes it's the language of divine judgment. To really get to the bottom of this, we have to go straight to the source. So we're going to zero in on a very specific passage in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, where Jesus himself is describing the signs of his return. Here's the verse we all know. Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and one left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and one left. It's so sudden, so stark. You can totally see why it's almost always linked to believers being removed from earth. But the context that comes right after this, well, it throws a huge twist into the whole thing. The key to understanding this entire passage is actually hidden in a small, often overlooked detail. The very next question the disciples ask. They just ask, "Where, Lord?" They want to know the destination of the ones who are taken. Are they going to heaven, to some place of safety? This simple question leads to an answer from Jesus that is anything but heavenly. Yeah, Jesus' reply isn't about mansions in the sky. Instead, he paints this really grim, earthy picture, one that his audience would have instantly recognized as a sign of death and total defeat. His answer is pretty shocking. He says, "Where the body is, there the vultures gather." Now, that is not the language of a heavenly reunion. Back then, vultures circling a dead body was a powerful, unmistakable image of judgment and utter devastation. So let's just pause here. What we have are 2 totally different ways to read this. The common view sees a beautiful, heavenly rescue, but the clue from the context, that vulture image, points straight toward divine judgment. It reframes being taken not as a flight to safety, but as being taken away for judgment. But Jesus doesn't even stop there. To make his point absolutely crystal clear, he gives a historical parallel. He says his return will be like the days of Noah, and this comparison really helps build the case for judgment. Just think back to the story of Noah's flood for a second. Who was taken? It was the wicked, right? They were judged and swept away by the floodwaters. And who was left? That was the righteous, Noah and his family, who remained on the earth to start over. Now, this pattern is the exact opposite of the popular rapture theory. In the example Jesus himself gives, it's the wicked who are taken away in judgment first, and it's the righteous who are the ones left behind. Okay, so you might be thinking, wait a minute, if taken in this passage means judgment, does that mean there's no rapture? Well, not necessarily. What the sources suggest is that there isn't just one big gathering at the end of time, but actually several distinct events. The key is to not confuse them. It seems Scripture talks about at least 3 separate movements. First, there's the gathering of the church, which happens before the final period of God's wrath begins. Second, you have the removal of the wicked for judgment right when Christ returns in glory. And third, there's the gathering of Israel's elect into the kingdom after that whole period. Different groups, different times, and for very different reasons. And you can see this in other places too. For instance, in Mark chapter 13, it's super clear that the gathering of the elect, which in this context means Israel, happens after the tribulation. That timing just doesn't fit with the event described for the church, which reinforces this idea that we're talking about multiple distinct events. So we have this new way of looking at one taken, one left. And we know there are at least 3 separate gatherings at the end of time. And all of that leaves us with one final and really crucial question. If these are all separate events with separate groups of people, how do they all fit together? What's the definitive sequence of events that Jesus lays out for the end of the age? Because getting that timeline right is, well, it's everything. And that is exactly what we're going to do in our final explainer of this series. We're going to take all of these different pieces, the rapture, the judgment of the wicked, the gathering of Israel, and we're going to weave them all into a single, understandable timeline, all based on another one of Jesus's parables. So, if this explainer challenged how you think about one taken, one left, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And make sure you catch our next explainer, where we use the parable of the wheat and the tares to put together the definitive end-time timeline. See you then.